Hello and welcome to a brief webinar on supporting people with dementia during COVID. My name is Cindy Hudson and I'm an occupational therapist. I want to thank you for taking a few moments to review this information. So a lot of this information today was taken from some series of webinars presented by Teepa Snow, who is an expert with dementia care. And she is quoted as saying that during COVID, we're being asked to do the impossible with the inadequate for the invisible. And we know the risks associated with isolation and the challenges that our facilities are facing in terms of staffing and other resources. And yet we're supposed to isolate those with dementia without any kind of tools to help us so that we can fight this virus. And it's an extremely challenging time for us, for our residents, our facilities. And so I do want to take a moment to also say thank you from the bottom of my heart for taking such good care of people. I know your hands are sore, your faces are sore, your ears are sore from all the precautions we need to take. And yet day in, day out, you're doing the best you can to take care of every resident in your buildings. These suggestions might make it a little bit easier for you and for the staff that you work with as well. So again, thank you for your time today. So what can we do with all of these crazy restrictions and challenges we have? Our job is to enable. And listed here are some of the staff members that we might be able to enable, depending on who is in your building and how available they are, to help us help manage the folks who have dementia and are going through such a tough time. And throughout the suggestions and ideas in this webinar, I'm going to assume that we all know to disinfect items and the surfaces that are touched, that provide the hand hygiene for ourselves, for our residents. And I'm not going to be repeating that on each slide. But people with mild dementia, people who are more higher functioning, you know, we're all used to going to different places to do different things. And a nursing home room was never designed to be the living room, the dining room, the bedroom, the everything room. So it's challenging. And at this time, then, consider if it is possible, with your facility's permission and teamwork, to set up some common areas that are going to respect social distancing. Can tables be arranged so that people are at least 6 feet apart? Can we position folks at 90-degree angles from each other so they're not facing each other's, I'll say, droplet zone as they talk and interact? We know that even those with mild dementia have a hard time being flexible. And the stress of the COVID restrictions may also be adding to a temporary decrease in their skills because nothing is normal and people are losing their ability to function as best they could. So what we can do to help them stick with that routine, stick with the familiar, would really enable them to cope a little bit better with these challenges. And how that might look with COVID is a little bit different in every building, of course, and for every individual. But if we can keep the shower days the same, if we can make sure they get their morning newspaper or follow their morning routine, whatever it might be, to help them have that sense of familiarity, and the routine can really help them cope with these challenges right now. You know that you may be seeing for yourself with family or friends, excuse me, that being in the same place for too long is going to trigger distress in the brain. Our brains need a change of environment, a change of scenery. So can our residents at least maybe sit in a chair outside of their doorway? Again, can we enable some common areas to be safe? Teepa Snow notes that doorways can be kind of magical. And she says that, when we go through a doorway, the hippocampus is going to reset itself. And remember that the hippocampus in our brain is responsible for learning and memory, our sense of time and navigation. It also regulates motivation, emotion, and consolidates the short-term memories to long-term memories. So the hippocampus serves a pretty important function. And if moving to a new location better enables that part of the brain to fire off and be triggered, we're going to support cognitive functioning for our individuals. And that can be an important and somewhat, maybe, easy task to accomplish depending on the setup of your facility. We know that when people are told, that they can't do something that they want to do, something is off limits, that's going to potentially lead to some confrontation, and that can be a real challenge for our tired STNAs that are just trying to move through the day. But remind those caregivers, the STNAs, that it is hard to argue with somebody who's agreeing with you. And if we can teach those STNAs to recognize the emotion that that person is expressing and respond to that emotion, we're going to validate those individuals that are under our care and recognize that they are humans, they are allowed to be angry, and that's a normal part of what's going on right now. We hear it in the media, but I'm not always so sure that our residents have that experience, that it's okay to be angry. So you know what? It is frustrating that you have to stay in your room again today, Mr. Jones, and I don't blame you for being upset. You know, those kinds of things can help with that rapport that we so carefully need to establish and keep that rapport going. And if we can anticipate a person's needs and bring items to their room before they become upset, that can help diminish those confrontational interactions as well. A little bit more in confrontation, we know that sometimes redirection doesn't work when there's already an unmet need going on. So, you know what, don't talk to me, don't bother me, I need to go home, is where that person may be coming from. And we need to kind of figure out, is home maybe an unmet need of some sort? If they're already out in the hallway or already wandering, maybe in a locked unit, walk with them and let's talk about what home means to them. So do they need to go home to feed the kids? And maybe they're the hungry one. Or do they need to go home because they need to see their daughter? Maybe there's a social need. And maybe what we can do is at least make a phone call and help establish that connection and be reassuring for the person on that level. Somebody just says, I need to go home, and they can't explain why. Maybe there's an emotional need for something familiar. And what can we provide for them then that's familiar for them? Can we do a task or an activity together? Can they look at a photo album, for example, that's for them, that's personally relevant for them? And I do want to say that, you know, I know photo albums can be hard to make in facilities because oftentimes families aren't involved or aren't able to bring in any pictures. But if we know something about an individual, we can make kind of sort of our own photo album, maybe getting meaningful pictures from the internet or from a magazine, and create this photo album together with the individual looking through magazines, helping decide which pictures are important to them. And we can pull out those photos, maybe glue them onto a cut up piece of cardboard, an old manila folder, for example, bind them together or put them in a 3-ring binder to make their own easy kind of memory book about things that are personally relevant and important. It can go a long way in helping to reassure an individual. Along those lines, engagement is so important, and that's something that's gotten so much more difficult with all of the COVID restrictions going on. Per the Journal of American Medical Directors Association, over 50% of those in a SNF feel lonely. And that statistic was taken before COVID hit. So obviously that number is much, much higher these days. And meaningful relationships and the ability to be self-determined, to determine your own schedule, your own routine, your own lifestyle, meaningful relationships and that self-determination are lacking in a nursing home to begin with. And they're even more impaired now under the COVID restrictions. And this article notes that there's a loss on 3 levels, actually. A person or even maybe a pet who made them feel valued is absent or missing because they can no longer visit face-to-face. The person can no longer participate in the regular groups that they enjoyed that had a common interest. And there's a loss of connection to their more active networks, the bigger world at large, so to speak. So active networks, even in a SNF, are limited and lacking in the sense that they're not seeing our faces because we're wearing masks. They're not seeing familiar people. They may not even be seeing fellow residents because everybody's supposed to stay in their room. Everybody's in isolation. They're not seeing the people that were a part of their daily life, but non-essential, like the volunteers or the barber, people that came into the building. So there's a real loss on 3 levels, and people are feeling very isolated, very lonely, and can be very confused and frightened. So some strategies to promote some engagement might be to add onto your name tag so that it's going to help promote the ease of that personal connection. Again, that depends on your facility, and some facilities use their own name tags that are pretty well designed. We can use virtual visits. We know we're hearing and seeing a lot about that these days, but remind maybe the activities department to stream a meaningful event for that individual if they can, or to enable them to view a previously recorded church service from their church. A lot of that is happening right now, and a really good way to help people feel connected to the groups and organizations that are meaningful to them. Maybe we can remind family members to send cards or letters, and including the artwork that kids are making if possible, or old family photos. You know, the other thing I think is that we sometimes in some of our homes, we've got little ones doing a lot of coloring these days. So if we have a lot of crafts and things that the children have made, if you're getting overloaded with it, maybe share it with your facility if that's allowed, because that can be very good reminiscence tool or very cheerful for some of our residents with dementia. Maybe have volunteers or family members call each day to say good morning or good night, and that can help with orientation for some of our folks. Plus be reassuring that that loved one is still out there, just can't visit them. Those with dementia and depression might need a lot of opportunities for some brief activities for both mental, physical, and emotional stimulation. So we know that some people are maybe going to be a little bit more inclined to refuse us. And if we can negotiate and agree and mean it that, hey, if you just, you know, work with me for 5 minutes on an ADL task, or let's go for a walk for 5 minutes, or some exercises, practice these more oral motor exercises, that type of thing. Brief intervals a few times a day for folks who are depressed and confused can at least engage them and keep them ready for more activity as these restrictions get lifted. Okay, so here's just a quick sample of a possible name tag addition. Some of our name tags, it's a little bit hard to see the person's first name. This makes it a little bit easier, and if they can connect that name with a face, that's going to help them feel a little bit more connected to their environment. A little bit more about engagement. I want to talk about simulated presence. Simulated presence therapy is found to be effective in improving the quality of life for those with dementia. And it's kind of like a shadow box or a memory book. The simulated presence can be a series of questions that would evoke memories to help fire up the brain. So this is where maybe a family would either make a recording as one way, or it could be a scripted conversation for a phone call. But in either event, if it's going to be a recording, you would have the family member say, hey, Dad, remember the time you chaperoned our 8th grade trip to Washington, D.C.? Pause and allow that person to actually come up with that memory, pull out that file of memory, and then have that family member continue. So, Dad, what was that field trip like for you? Pause. Was it tiresome? Pause. Remember when we thought that student got lost at the Lincoln Memorial? That was kind of scary, right? Pause. And allow that person to have that recollection, have that memory, but it's going to, take a little bit of time for that person to have that memory and reminisce on that event. The family's voice on the recording can be certainly very reassuring to the person. It can help make a scripted phone call be a little bit smoother. If the family is able, whether it's a few phone calls or a few recordings on a few different significant events, for that person to be prompted to recollect, that can be very, very helpful for helping people feel a little bit connected. We want to trigger some long-term memories. And so what we do as therapists, we know this. When we find out that a resident, worked as an electrician or something like that, we engage them in some random conversations like, hey, I'm thinking about hanging a ceiling fan in my living room. What would you suggest about that? What might be dangerous, or what tricks or tips can you give me about that? Remind the families to have those kinds of conversations as well. Seek out their loved ones' advice, seek out their history, their knowledge base. Even if it may not be so reliable right now, it still shows the individual with dementia that we care, we value, they have something to contribute and to offer. So we want to elicit that information, and we want to remind families to elicit that information. A little bit more on engagement with families. We know that if you've ever tried a video call with somebody with dementia, it can be awkward for everybody, and it can be pretty short-lived. So if possible, try to have the family video chat during a routine family event. So if the son is starting to prepare dinner and he can aim the camera from the computer or tablet at himself, and then what he's doing, he can ask mom's opinion. Do you think these onions have caramelized enough, or whatever it might be? But make it kind of a window into family life and into normal events, and engage mom or the resident that way. The other thing you might have noticed is if you try to have a little one engage in a video conversation, that's all of about 10 seconds, and then they're off and running, and it's not real engaging. So if you say to the grandma, hey, I'm going to see if little Johnny will give you an air guitar concert, and you ask little Johnny to, hey, show us how you play the air guitar. Little Johnny may be more than willing to demonstrate his skills with that, and it's a lot more engaging, it's a lot more real, and it gives the person with dementia a chance to connect with the family on a different level, and can be very rewarding, really kind of for everybody, and kind of fun. So people with moderate functioning skills, people with moderate dementia, we want to engage people in what they can do. So for example, after sanitizing, can they wipe down tables? Can they do sorting tasks? Organizing things. Folks at this point are losing their life story, and they're losing their sense of self. So memory books with the family's pictures, or memory books that we help them create, can connect that person to who they are. And when we talk about activities that they can do that are safe, obviously nothing sharp, nothing that they could put in their mouth and choke on, things that can be sanitized before and after use. So those are kind of some of the sorting prerequisites, I guess we can say. We know folks with moderate decline can be some of the most problematic for our tired STNAs, but if we can just get them on board with engaging the resident in something that's going to be sustained by the individual, it's going to be a lot easier than dealing with an agitated resident all shift, dealing with a confrontational situation. It's going to be a lot safer for the individual. They may not get upset and risk injury or a fall. Obviously, the negative behaviors would diminish if we can just get everybody to buy into engaging these residents in something that they can achieve, can be successful with. We definitely want to respect the individual, and when we engage them in things that they can sustain attention to and be successful with, we are respecting that person who just happens to have dementia. A reminder too that folks can do best if they're asked to do a task with a visual reminder cue. So for example, if you're going to have them if you mix up 3 decks of cards, and they're different decks of cards, the back of this deck has a flower, the back of that deck has landscape, the back of that deck has an animal. You mix them all up and you say, hey, Mrs. Jones, can you help me sort out these decks of cards? Give them a sample. Let's make one pile with this picture, one pile with that picture, and one pile with the other picture. And they can follow that template or pattern and help you organize all the decks of cards. Be sure to thank them afterwards. When we say thank you when people do something that we value, we want to show that we value these folks. So remember to say thank you afterwards. People with moderate to low functioning, again, they may have a high sensory need or a low sensory tolerance. We know that, but let's make sure we cue in the STNAs on this as well. Okay, we know that these folks tend to be pretty unsafe. These are the ones that may be having more behaviors, more falls. Again, we need to try to engage them in safe activities so we can help them avoid the unsafe ones or the negative ones. Can we give them a hand massage as a way of rubbing in hand sanitizer, helping to keep themselves and everybody else safe? Remind the STNAs that their preferences can change daily. And so they need to reoffer something tomorrow that they tried that didn't work. Maybe today they didn't want to rummage through their purse that has all kinds of interesting stuff in it. Give them the purse again tomorrow, let them rummage through. They may be a little bit more likely to engage tomorrow. And remind the STNAs that folks at this level can have some pretty strong sensory responses. So they want to be careful with things like aromas or tactile input, that type of thing. A little bit more on folks with low to moderate functioning skills. Again, we want to provide safe things that they can take apart and reassemble. Okay, we want to remind the staff to give people extra time, enabling to eat finger foods, the food that we can safely put into a mug for them to drink from. And again, if there's any safe way we can get people in a common area, we did an informal survey. We asked the FRCs what they're seeing as the biggest concerns right now for folks with dementia. And the common themes were negative behaviors were increasing, more falls, decreased appetite, decreased weight. And it makes sense if people are eat in their room or be isolated, there's not that stimulation going on. There's a lot less intake going on. So if there's any way to make a common area safe, that, from a social distancing standpoint, that also enables better supervision. It enables people to imitate and mimic, oh, I'm in this room, everybody's eating, might motivate them to, again, do what they can do to self-feed as well. People with moderate to low levels of functioning are going to be more oriented towards sensations. Areas like the mouth, the hands, the feet, and the genitals are likely to have undergone some sensory changes because the brain is changing. So sensory input to those areas can cause really strong positive or negative reactions. And we want to watch out for that and train the STNAs to be careful when they're doing, for example, that hand massage to rub in the sanitizer. That may be a very frightening thing for some folks. We can try music, rhythm, clapping, swing, good foot stomping, aggressive foot stomping. It could be a great outlet for any kind of pent up energy, anxiety, gross motor activity. So trying to engage people in that, try to have the activities department provide those opportunities. People who are more severely impaired with dementia have pretty low level of functioning. Again, we want to remind the STNAs to take care of the whole person, not just the shell that we see on first glance when you walk into a room. Notice what makes them tense, what makes them relax. Remember and teach that deep proprioception is going to be more effective. If we start touching the shoulder, we're getting close to the face. And if somebody's in a state where they know they can't actively move very much to protect themselves, but you're touching my shoulder, you're getting close to my face. and I can't defend myself. So that's scary. And the couple things I might be able to do is spit or pinch. I got those skills left, and that's what I'm going to use to defend myself. So we might want to be careful about touching the shoulder. We want to teach the STNAs to be careful about that as well. And we want to give sensory experiences that will enable the person to feel cared for. Careful washing, calm music, know what's going to be pleasurable or scary for that person and act accordingly. The ability to perceive sound is the last area of the brain to fade. And so make sure we train the STNAs to promote a comforting environment for our folks. What's the TV or the radio on? Is it on loud, jarring music? Is it a violent TV show with lots of yelling or guns? Again, think about that brain. It's so challenged at this point in time, it may not be able to discern TV from reality. And how frightening to know that you can barely move, but you're hearing gunshots go off around you and people are yelling. How scary would that be? So please, again, train the STNAs to be very careful with the sensory input that they're providing for those residents. So our job, as you've gathered, is to apply the techniques that we have figured out that are going to help meet that person's unspoken needs. Do they need more contact with others? Do they need to have something to do so they're not bored? Do they need to feel a connection to their routines? If we use what we know to help meet those unspoken needs, we can do so much to help minimize the falls that are happening in our buildings, minimize the risk of functional and cognitive declines, minimize negative behaviors. But it's up to us to be the detectives and the translators of what their behaviors are telling us. And we're the trained, skilled clinicians. We know what to look for, and we know what to try to do to alleviate the challenges. And if we don't do this, I'm not sure anybody else will, especially right now while everything is so challenged and so strained. And during this time of restrictions, we know that families can be looking for ways to support their loved ones. Let them know what you need to better support their family member, whether it's items from home, information about their personal history, can they make phone calls, can they send mail? Those are the things that we can help engender people to do to help support our folks that have dementia and are struggling to get through these challenging days. So a brief idea about the evaluation, the plan of care. We can look at our reason for referrals. There's some sample goals. And these plan of cares don't have to be for very long. It may be more like a maintenance therapy program, which is more thoroughly explained on our website. You can go there and look up information about maintenance therapy under the employee portal. Or it may be that we're going to have a plan of care to determine and find out and to train. And then it may just be for a few weeks. So I want to leave you with a couple of last quotations from Chief of Snow at different points in time. But I think these are really relevant, and sharing these concepts with the STNAs and the staff that we work with can help engender that caring approach on everyone's behalf. Dementia doesn't rob someone of their dignity. It's our reaction to them that does. And COVID gave us license to imprison those whose only crime is that they can't be independent. Our resources are listed here, as well as contact information for myself, Cindy Hudson, and the Director of Clinical Compliance for Aspen, Annalisa Torres. Thank you for your time and attention today, and thank you for taking such good care of yourself and our residents. Bye-bye.